Great.
And that's also Taras. Yeah, Michael. So here we are. It's the top of the hour, and I want to move quickly in order to allow you to have as much time as possible. So Ivo Mensch is here to moderate a panel of people that we met in Kiev in 2019 at an Emerge gathering, a gathering that Emerge, which is part of Perspectiva, that Ivo is part of. Thomas and I were also at this event. And had it in Kiev because there's something happening in Kiev, and it wasn't this at the time, but what that was is actually making something possible, I think, between you at this moment that is something that we all can really profoundly learn from. So welcome, Michael, Lilia, Taras, Katya, and that's the whole group. And thank you, Ivo, for moderating, and we'll bow out now and turn it over to you, and they will be with us for the next full hour. Okay. Thank you so much.
And thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much. Just before we proceed, Jonathan Rowson is also in the group.
Oh.
He could also use a little pin next to his name. So he'll be speaking more to what you just said about why Emerge came to Kyiv, and a little bit more about the network. Because just a little bit about myself, I've been a part of Perspectiva and Emerge for close to 3 years now, I think, and in various kinds of roles. And as you mentioned, Thomas and Elizabeth, we were part of the second Emerge gathering, which was held in Kyiv, and that's why we have strong ties to Ukraine, and that's partly also why we are here in this room together. I'll pass it on to Jonathan. He can speak to that. He's one of the co-founders of Emerge, and he's going to talk to why the bigger picture here matters. And we are not doing this just in support of Ukraine, but why this actually matters for societies around the world. And I think I'll just hand it over to you, Jonathan, and speak to that.
Thank you very much, Ivo, and thank you, Elizabeth and Thomas and everyone else who's joined us. Many of us want to speak, and we have an hour, so I'm going to try and be brisk without being too brisk. My name is Jonathan Rowson. I'm director of Perspectiva, which is an organization in London. Our tagline is that we work to understand the connection between systems, souls, and society in theory and practice. And one of our major projects is the Emerge project, which is a way of joining social change initiatives that seem to be connected by a certain perspective on the world. It has something to do with the feeling that the world as we know it is changing fundamentally, and that we have to change fundamentally with it. There's a longer story there, a whole conversation there, but that's the essence of it. And as part of that, we've had 3 major gatherings. The first in Berlin, the second in Kyiv, and a more recent one in Berlin. And I think it's because we were in Kyiv in 2019 at this event, that we're here at this event, and that we've been working recently to try to bring the Emerge community together around the question of Ukraine. Some of that history relates to the notion of Bildung, which, as many of your German background will know, the term has multiple meanings, but it arose. It's one of the points of connection with Ukraine, because in their process of trying to move towards being a Western country and democratizing civil society and governance, there's a cultural side to that, of people becoming more aware of democratic norms and coming to live them. And there's an educational side to that. And this gave rise, it's a long story, but there's a book here, the Ukrainian version of a book called The Nordic Secret, and it's really a story of what made the Nordic countries so successful, and that Bildung, this process of transformative aesthetic, civic, and moral education, was a critical part of that. And the Ukrainian civil society, particularly aspects of the integral Ukrainian civil society, latched onto this and thought this was something they could work with to make sense of how the community could grow. So that was the kind of conceptual and organizational connection with Ukraine. I should briefly say personally, I had a prior connection. I used to play chess professionally. And one of my earliest experiences of traveling abroad was to a tournament in Romania where my first round opponent was a guy called Vasily Yemelin, and he played with the Soviet Union hammer and sickle flag at the board. And I just remember it vividly because it was something about suddenly being on this world stage up against this vast country in the context of the Cold War. And then subsequently, of course, Soviet Union broke up. I got to know many Ukrainians and Russians. I even learned a little bit of chess Russian to make sense of what was happening. So the issue, when it broke in February, felt very personal already. It already felt that we are caught up in this. This is real to us. But I want to share, for those who haven't had that kind of experience, what's pretty obvious why Ukraine matters to Ukrainians, right? It's their home, and they're fighting for their lives and their families and their way of being. But why should it matter so much to other people? By most estimates, there are something like 200 countries in the world, just shy of that. And sadly, it looks like there are roughly 40 wars underway. Of course, how you define a war as opposed to a skirmish or a conflict is a moot point. But if you look online, it seems to be the rule of thumb is that there are roughly 40 wars underway as we speak. So what is it about Ukraine that draws our attention to feel that it's somehow seismic and important enough to be really worth paying attention to giving our time and energy and money to? And I see three main reasons. The first is the most civilizational, let's say, and it's the threat of nuclear war, incipient, latent, but nonetheless there. The notion that the Ukraine conflict, because of the support for Ukraine, because of Russia's nuclear arsenal, there is this slightly increased risk of nuclear war in the world. Now, arguably, it's only slightly increased, but given the stakes, that's enough to be concerned. So the first reason to pay attention is, look, this could get out of control very badly, very quickly, all the more reason to attend to it, right? But it doesn't follow what you should do strategically, just to be aware that that's part of the context. The second reason, I think, is a bit more historical, or even meta-historical, in the sense that when we look at the bigger picture in the world and the attractors of how the future might be, if you factor in climate change, other forms of ecological collapse, if you factor in the gradual breakdown of democratic health on several metrics around the world, the rise of strongmen dictators, and then you bring in the compounding effects of social media giving rise to cultural polarization, you bring in now impacts on global food prices, cost of living crisis, arguably risk of economic breakdown. There are many who read one of the major attractors of the future as a kind of collapse, systemic breakdown, ecological, informational, governance breakdown, in which society as we know it just kind of collapses. It's a possible future. It's not the only possible future, but it's a possible future. The other is that because of that threat that many feel, giving rise to feelings of anxiety and identity threat and the need to look after one's own and so forth, that this will give rise to an increased authoritarianism around the world. That people feel that the pressure to give over your power to authoritarian leadership and say, you please protect us, I don't care how you do it, is grave and great. And so there's two major attractors, authoritarianism on the one hand, collapse on the other. But there is a third, and the third is the viable open society, which is the major theme of this set of fundraising events, and what Ukraine speaks to very, very closely. The survival of open societies, fighting for open societies matters. Now listen, open society is not a catch-all panacea, all good thing. It's not as though there aren't problems with open societies. It's not as though it hasn't given rise to many of the problems I just spoke about. There's a lot to be said for working within open societies, but the difference with open societies is that it's a learning mechanism. Open societies in principle learn from how to live well together, learn how to change institutions, learn how for cultures to evolve, learn how to do politics better, in principle. And unlike the other two attractors, this one is one that we need to fight for, need to keep going. Not just in Ukraine, but in the rest of the world. Anyone beaming in from the US will know this is a real and present danger over the next few years in the US. It's already a problem in India. It's clearly there in China. In many countries, there is this creeping authoritarianism. So keeping the dream of open societies alive really, really matters. And Ukraine matters there because this is why, one of the reasons why the war broke out. Potentially successful, viable democracy with a free market integrated to other European markets, a vibrant culture, their own language, their own education system, civil society growing, a model of the kind of democratic vibrance and coherence that the world risks losing sight of. And this is a kind of paradox in a sense that just as the West is sort of growing weary of its own democratic and market institutions, along comes a country that says, no, that's good stuff. Let us have that. We want some of that. So whatever the problems are with it, it's significantly better than the other options available. So that's the second reason, the survival of open societies, the first being awareness of nuclear escalation. The third is a bit more subtle. And again, it could take us too long to get to in depth, but it's something to do with cultural code. I don't know if you've been watching Ukraine closely on social media, but there's something wonderfully refreshing, inspiring, heartening, soul-giving about the way they've responded to this war as a whole, as a country. And it's not just the courage and the heroism of protecting one's home. It's also something about the humor in the context of tragedy. There was a fundraiser raising many millions about sending Vladimir Putin to Jupiter in a rocket, which did actually raise money that was used for good purposes in Ukraine. But of course, the premise of that is absurd. And yet, is it absurd? In a weird way, it very much gets to the heart of the matter of we're not going to be diminished by this person. Our soul will not be crushed and destroyed. He may try to take our lands, but he won't take our sense of what it is to be human. And in that commitment to humor, commitment to protecting pets, another big feature. Many, many images around of Ukrainians going to great lengths to dig out cats and dogs from the rubble. But why does that matter? Because it signifies something about the value of not just human life, as in save the humans, but the nature of why it's worth being human. Because you have this capacity to care, to be tender, to find joy, to look after. And they've also modeled this beautifully. And then if I can give it a little bit more of a cultural spin, I would say Ukraine is modeling what it is to be post-tragic in a world of growing tragedy. Ukraine is showing that, look, it's not as though there isn't tragedy and disaster. There absolutely is. But it's not clear that that has to completely destroy the value of life. Life is still worth living nonetheless. And it's getting away from this binary of everything is great or everything is disastrous. No, for the next few decades, most of us in most of the world will be living challenging lives with contexts that are in flux, politically, ecologically, socially, technologically. And in amongst all that, we have to keep our soul intact, find a way of living well, reaffirming what matters and how we help each other and how we build our lives and how we rebuild our lives. Because another thing I found very inspiring about Ukraine's response is there's never any doubt about rebuilding their country. You know, they speak to the architects, the conversations are already underway. This will happen. It's just a matter of when and how and who's going to pay for it. But there's no doubt that it will happen. And that's also deeply inspiring. So for all of those reasons, I didn't call it meta-modern, but for those who are interested in theory, that last part, I think Ukraine are modeling a kind of meta-modern cultural code, but that's a theoretical discussion for another day.
Yeah.
So that's me. Three main reasons Ukraine really matters to the rest of the world. Really worth attending to, spending time with, getting to know. And last recommendation, BBC Sounds Ukrainecast, roughly half an hour every day. I listen to it. Very warmly recommend it. It's the BBC at its best. And it gives a good insight into Ukraine for anyone around the world who's wondering what's going on there. Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks. Thank you very much, Jonathan, for landing that, yeah, and framing that. We'll be diving more into the topics that have come up. But first, I just want to give space for each and every one of you from Ukraine to introduce yourselves and, like very briefly, also how the war has impacted you and the kinds of initiatives that you are currently running in response to it. Why don't you kick it off, Taras?
Do we have a couple minutes each? 1 minute?
Yeah, briefly. I feel already like the time is just going so fast. We have so much to talk about, but thank God there's another fundraiser coming up on the 16th where we can unpack much more.
I'm Ukrainian, but I live in the United States for 10 years. I'm a scientist, molecular geneticist, but I'm also second lieutenant of motorized infantry in Ukrainian army, and my family lives in Kyiv. When the war started, the night of the war, we've seen it on news, and we had a dinner with the house with multiple Ukrainians just converging, and we didn't expect war happening, but when it happened, we started calling our parents, so they need to wake up and go to shelter because there were multiple attacks launched from the north. And in the first few days, I realized that I cannot do anything besides somehow doing something for Ukraine. Multiple times I've seen my mom on the phone, and I was thinking that would be the last time that I've seen her, because there were air raids, sirens, and cruise missile exploded about 1 block away from my house, from my childhood home. And then I met with few people who are here, Anka and Alessia. They are in the room with us, listening to us. We converged and formed some sort of organism that extended just one body. So 3 of us started working on ways to help Ukraine in all possible ways, how we can think. And we live in different places in the world, but modern technology allows us to connect and work for Ukraine in various forms. And those various forms are humanitarian aid, medical aid, military aid, diplomatic aid, political aid, and other things. And if you would like to help anyhow, please reach out to us. We have very broad international network of support in Ukraine. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Taras. Do you want to pick it up, Lilia?
Yes, okay, I will. So I'm organizational consultant, leadership development coach in Ukraine. I was in Ukraine when the war started, and I was there for 2 months. On the 3rd month, I flee to another country. People use the word refugee when they speak about me right now. From the first day when the war started, I was buying arms, protective gear, medicine, cars for our volunteering defense, for territory volunteering defense for the troops. Some of my close friends are fighting in the front line for the present moment, and as well as my family members. So the war didn't come somewhere beside me. It's deep in my veins, in my blood, in everything I do, every day of my life. So that's how it is, the situation for the present one. Probably I will pass the word to Katya.
Thank you, my friend. My name is Katerina Yasko, and I'm currently based in Vilnius. We fled during the first days, just after the bomb started to fall on our heads. And I'm fortunate to have a husband who is Lithuanian, so we kind of came to a place where we were expected. So my life is divided into 3 parts now. One is fundraising and coordinating of various humanitarian initiatives linked to Lithuania. And because Lithuania is a great friend, besides Poland, it's probably the 2nd country who is so much involved. Secondly, I am trying to help the local community, Ukrainian community, mostly women, and I'm also doing my best to get here as many people from Mariupol among our friends who were kidnapped to the Russian territory. So the only way for them to get to Europe is through Baltic states. So through our Russian contacts, I'm trying to get them to Tallinn, then Riga and Vilnius, and get them settled here. And the third direction of my work is basically visiting this kind of gatherings like now and speaking for Ukraine and being kind of a voice or ambassador in those communities that we were related to even before the war. Thank you very much. And I'm an organizational psychologist by my profession, and I'm a certified trainer in nonviolent communication. So dialogue is kind of my religion, but it has some evolution, my vision of it now. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mihail.
Okay. Hi, my friends. So I am professor of marketing strategy and management, twice rector and president of universities, but in previous life, pre-war life. After war started, in 3 weeks, being experiencing bombardments and so on, I decided to move to Lviv. Now I'm back in Kiev, and I'm organizing a tactical combat casualty care courses. Never dreamed about this. And we did an extremely efficient program with our Swedish friends in Lviv. And now I hope to arrange a national-wide program for our military and territory defense casualties. We have an extremely large amount of young people, not only young people, who are desperately needing this. And besides, I developed a program for volunteers. We have an incredible cloud, I would say, of volunteers, people like me, like my friends, who never dreamed about doing what they are doing right now, helping everybody in our society, military, elderly people, children like Katya, and all the rest. And this have to help them to get a best practice of how to do this efficiently. So you see how life changing. The life started on 24th of February, changed our lives dramatically. And besides, me and my friends are not only dreaming, but trying to implement right now the building practices in Ukrainian life, to help people not simply adjust to new environment, but to change the life. We're constantly talking about future, not only about dramatic circumstances of today's life. And that's interesting for me as for a researcher. Thanks.
Thank you, Mihail. Yeah, thanks for these introductions. This already points to so much what we will be talking about here in the minutes that are remaining. And everyone here has also been like regular contributor in the weekly meetings that we've been holding since the start of the war. Last Wednesday we had our 12th meeting already, and it's been. Well, these conversations we've had have been beautiful, heartfelt sharing. Equally, they have been very practical, connecting the initiatives and, where can we buy tourniquets, for example, for on the battlefield. We've seen the networks come to life in real time, and also what we I don't know who coined it, but an explosion of trust. You know, there is so much trust in the field between people who are trying to help each other out, and that has just been absolutely wonderful to witness. And again, just a beautiful model for how I feel that we want to take these initiatives forward and need your help in. And yeah, so these weekly meetings are ongoing, and a lot of themes arose. We were thinking, like, what will we talk about? You know, what is the audience like? What do they need to hear? Dialogue already came up, but first dialogue came up. That was a big one. We have, of course, like Russians. What are we talking about? There's so much news. There's propaganda. It's very hard to make sense of like what is true, what is real. And so these are some of the themes that arose and that we are debating like on a weekly basis. So a few we've selected here, and some of the themes we felt strongly about. Dialogue, it's also the theme here with this fundraiser, of course, a lot. But there is another perspective on that. It is good, as was said in the beginning by Thomas. But yeah, so we wanna unpack these a little bit here now. But first, we thought it'd be a good idea to land with some historical awareness, because this is also often something that we feel is really, really lacking. And Mihail and Taras, I had like brief conversations with you about this, and you spoke to that. And so could you please like give like a brief overview of what we're dealing here? The Russian soul is something we spoke to, the imperialism, the ideas behind that. It's not just expansion of NATO, for example, is something that is being given as a reason. So we're dealing with something here that is deeply mythic in origin, and yeah, and why Putin probably won't stop if he isn't stopped like here. So over to like maybe Taras, you could speak to that really briefly. There's a historic pattern here, you said.
In 1100, so about 900 years ago, Kiev was fourth biggest city in the world after Constantinople, Palermo, Thessaloniki, and Kiev had about 100,000 inhabitants at that time. Paris had 50,000 at that time, and London about 20. And in 1169, at that time, Moscow was formed for about 16 years, 1/6. Moscow prince came to Kiev and razed it to the ground. And after that, what was Proto-Ukraine disappeared from the map of Europe for 100 years. That was the first time, and I will send links in the chat so you can read Wikipedia articles about that. At that time, it was first historical notion that one group of Slavic people destroyed other group without remorse. At that time, Kiev had about 400 temples, 8 international markets, and diverse international community. It was truly metropolis of a global importance. And after that event, after 1169, we disappeared. And that was first clash between Moscow and Kiev as a memes, as a organizational, as a systems of different kind of interaction with the world. I'll scroll back multiple hundred years, fight that unfortunately we were losing against similar enemy. And 1708, it was another attempt after multiple failed attempts for Ukrainian identity to somehow form itself. And we had battle with overwhelmingly stronger opponent, and we lost it. We were aligned with Sweden at that time, and Sweden and Ukraine lost. And there was event, I will also send this link in the chat, called Rape of Baturin, or Genocide of Baturin, or Sack of Baturin, where forces of Moscow Empire came and slaughtered about 15,000 people in then capital of Ukraine. And this was in all European magazines at the time. Again, you will see it in the Wikipedia article in English. So out of this 15,000 people, about 7,500 were women and children. How they were killed: they were put in churches, churches were closed, and they were burned alive. and those remains were later excavated, and we have proofs that that's what happened. So it was genocide in the sense that people were killed. So whole city was completely cut out, and people were killed by national identity, essentially by ethnic identity. That those people were Ukrainians who didn't want to be Russians. Then scrolling back a couple of years more, in 1932, 1933, recognized by United Nations, between 7 and 10 million Ukrainians were exterminated in artificial famine. And all of those things you can just read in English speaking sources. So it's not just something that we talk in, something that is available readily for everyone to check. So with, let's say it's 7 million, it's still the amount of Jews exterminated during Second World War. So we're talking about full-scale genocide of a group of people in the middle of Europe. And we're trying to recover after that for years. There were multiple other events. For example, for about 400 years, Ukrainian language was officially prohibited on multiple occasions. I will also send this article. There were about 50 occurrences of prohibition of Ukrainian languages by Russia. And Ukrainian culture was eradicated also for hundreds of years. So when we'll get closer to the question whether we are Nazis or whether we are fighting for some very strange fight that maybe some of us don't understand or some of you don't understand, we can bring that topic. Because in order to form some sort of community, some sort of organism, you need to have a cluster of identity somehow. And that cluster starts from family. So you love your family, you love your tribe, you love your city, you love your country, and then you love the whole globe. You love the whole humanity. So we think that there are these circles of love and care and kindness. And unfortunately, we've been denied our circle, which many countries in Europe successfully achieved. Like Germany or France or Britain, you had that chance to form. We were pillaged for hundreds of years, for 900 of years. And hopefully now we emerging as a new formation. And hopefully you will help us to protect that, what's happening.
Thanks. Yeah, Taras. Anybody else want to comment on this PowerPoint? Thanks for the landing of the history. Very much needed. Often it's been painted, especially Russian propaganda, that it's not like Ukraine, sometimes called an artificial construct, for example. So thanks for that. Do any of you want to comment briefly on that? Like for example, the imperial aspirations of Russia, what is behind this?
Let me tell a couple of words.
Yeah.
Add a little bit.
Briefly, again, because also I'm very much aware of time. So thanks.
Okay, yeah, I'll try to be as brief as possible.
Yeah.
So the idea of Ukraine should be contrasted to a different idea of enigmatic Russian soul, And if you look at 1939 year, the French philosopher Pastor de Custine visited Russia, and what he wrote down about the Kremlin. Kremlin is just a haunt of ghosts in all its forms and disorder and arbitrariness. Everything betrays the constant anxiety for their safety, which is felt by terrible people who have doomed themselves to life in this fantastic world. So it's fantastic world, totally released from soul. That's the background. It will be enough. Maybe we will return to that point. I could continue with an explanation what we are experiencing right now because of this. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Michal. I think maybe it's a good segue to kind of move on to this. It's often said that, we should be extending empathy to Putin, for example. The next point I really want to invite you to kind of dive into is really the call for dialogue and the way that is being, bandied and being promoted, and to do that. But Katerina, you already spoke to that, right? Like, And we've been having back and forth here between the two of us, in the way that many people, even like close networks and people who, you know, we think are our allies, often gloss over the reality. And yeah, could you please speak to that? Because we've had, you know, some pretty strong back and forth about this, the topic of dialogue and the way we should be talking about Russia and to Russia.
Yes, thank you, Ivo. It was a really very developmental process also for me, this conversations with you and Jonathan, coming from the community that is deeply rooted in the paradigm of dialogue. I truly felt that something is going wrong just from the beginning of the war. And also very, very soon after, I believe many of the participants of this event noticed the release of an article by Otto Scharmer, who spoke also about a collective field of shared awareness, so-called CASA, collective action from shared awareness, and Putin. And slowly but surely, together with other colleagues from Ukraine, facilitators, mediators, also nonviolent communication trainers, but local, Ukrainian, we understood that there should be something has to be done, like some official stance has to be manifested, because we truly believe that inviting Ukrainians into dialogue with Russians now is absolutely wrong. It is against the principle of no harm, and it could be a big manipulation. So finally, this document, which is called 7 Points on the War and Dialogue from Ukrainian mediators and dialogue facilitators, appeared in the beginning of May. And this document basically states that there may be different tracks of dialogue. And one track is dialogue about ceasefire. This kind of negotiations, they have to be there, of course. The negotiations around the exchange of captured. This is important always, at any moment. But speaking about other tracks, like dialogues at lower levels, not political level, but dialogues between Russians and Belarusians and Ukrainians on in a more, common, on a more common issues and at a simpler layers, this is just not timely. And encouraging Ukrainians to step into these dialogues before the crimes were acknowledged, before the Russian war criminals were punished, before the territorial integrity was restored. This is just another form of violence. So what we observe, and thank you very much for some feedback that we received from you, because we were checking our assumptions with the Perspectiva, is that there's some form of spiritual bypassing going on. Some Europeans, they really want to be good people, and this is absolutely understandable. So there is this action bias that we have to do something. So in order to return things to their previous status, to get back to normal, let's dialogue, which is wrong. The world will never be the same again. And in a way, an action, a timely action, and protection of someone suffering from a bully is compassion. So there are times when dialogue is timely, and there are times when just the bully has to be stopped and there is no place for dialogue. So we would like to invite our European colleagues for a certain level of discernment, for attention towards the nuances. And we truly believe in dialogue, and it seems to us that time will come for dialogues and restorative circles and mediations. We do not know when, we don't even want to think about it now. But now it's definitely not timely. Thank you.
Thanks, Katja. Anybody else want to comment on this one? No. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. It's a theme that emerged, and I believe the term is right. It is a form of bypassing here. In some other online conversations that I've seen, the Ukrainians often were denied agency. It was talking over their heads. In some rooms, even no one from Ukraine was even present when these things were discussed. So that was like really, really shocking to sometimes have to witness, and angering, to be honest. So thanks for bringing that up. And yeah, you already spoke about the protective use of force to end aggression is an act of compassion, even when aggression is needed to do that. We've been having conversation about protective use of force here, and that is the right way to actually see the fight in this point. You all have spoken to this in some form or another. You want to comment on that further? Taras, I know you've been quite outspoken on this point as well.
Thank you. I just quickly want to address, I'm getting messages in the chat and people asking how could we essentially betray our promises not to join NATO. And I give a second of that. Russia tried to undermine our governance from 1991, implementing different agents from pretty powerful hidden structures, and not just hidden. So in 2004, Russian mafia came to power in Ukraine with President Yanukovych, and only after that we applied to NATO. So just a quick answer so you understand. Russia tries to undermine Ukrainian independence for as long as Ukraine exists. Speaking about use of force. Before the war, before this 90 days, I had a very strong conviction that violence should be out of the table in any sort of communications, that pacifism is the way to go globally, that we should be non-violent in any way possible because that's the future of humanity. And then when I've seen my mom dropping the phone after the rocket struck the ground and she was running to the shelter, I realized that I would kill a person in order to save my family. And then I was thinking how much further I will go, whether I will kill Putin, for example, and whether I hate Russians. And the answer was no, I don't hate Russians at all. I will just kill them. I will kill them with love. I will look in their eyes and I will be loving them. And we are one world, we are one unity, one life. The whole story here is the story of the universe. We are pocket of life and our only enemy is entropy. In 10 to the hundreds power of years, we all will disappear as everything. But now we need to fight for life. And I don't think Russians are fighting for life now. So with love, I will kill them. And I'm contributing to killing Russians right now without any hate.
Thank you. Anyone else want to pick that up on, like you mentioned, the hate, Lilia?
Yeah, I would just add some words that in some societies we heard the words that poor Russian soldiers were sent to war and they didn't know. So coming from global perspective, coming to very personal perspective, that they are so poor kids who were sent to war. Our security defense courts, a lot of calls, in fact, when Russian soldiers spoke to their moms, to their women, to their sisters and everyone, and the way they speak, what they speak, there is no even a single word of understanding of dialogue or something. There is hatred, lots of anger, and they just came to kill. And when there is a dialogue, when someone is saying to you bad words, you have a choice. But when someone came to your home with a weapon and putting that weapon to your head, you have no choice. You have to protect yourself. You have to fight. And the point is, they don't even regret for what they are doing and the way their actions lead and the terrible stories that we read and that we face. And there are a lot of our a lot of people that we know in person with whom this happened. It's not just a story that we read from newspapers, but the real stories of real people. So that's the question, and that's the answer for the dialogue.
Thank you. Katja, you're muted.
There is one beautiful poem that we recently translated with help from a Russian-speaking Kiev-based wonderful poet who wrote something that I think expresses what we're speaking about now. And the English poet Adrian Scott, a dear friend, helped to translate it. So if you would allow, I would like to read this poem.
Go ahead.
It's called With Love. Thoughts hammering in drilling litanies every day, igniting fantasies that arrive to bite the throats of our enemies. With love. And the knife slips under the apple skin until it is naked and grated and soused with cream to feed the smiling child. With love. Awakening our hunger to meet the tank's elephantine plot, the people move bringing cocktails to burn their flanks. With love. On the bedhead, a candle of prayer we light, entombed by the window's blackout. In long hours, we pray for a quiet night. With love. From scattered pieces, the medics sew us together. Thank you, Doc. You're most welcome. Without our legs, still the great feast we enter. With love. The black telegram arrives, the fatal fact that dryly dubs you with the lot of widowhood. Tell the children of their father's heroic act. With love. This war I will never forgive. It's effrontery. Our rage is sustained by a blood moon above, until we down vodka and borscht in victory. With love. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. We are going towards the end of this. Before we want to close this part on love and hatred and strong emotions, I'm wondering, have we spoken to this enough? How do you not become who you fight, which is, of course, important to not lose your own humanity in this fight. So I'm quite curious, before we move on in a couple of minutes to the looking towards the future, like personally, how have you dealt with emotions and this topic? Michael, you want to speak to that a bit? Yeah.
Okay, when Jonathan talked about collapse versus authoritarianism, I thought that probably collapse should be contrasted not to authoritarian power, but to development. We now are at a tipping point. Not only we Ukrainians, the whole world right now. And when you are thinking not about just disaster, about your precious life, which is now in the past, and the necessity to build something new for your family, for your friends, for those your beloved friends who never will build anything else because they had died in a battle. I have a lot of friends died already. So, the most optimistic maybe point could give a peace to our soul and background to our next move is desire to build something beautiful, something new, not to restore old previous Ukraine, with all its pros and cons, not waiting which is more evident, pros or cons, but to build new, not only new buildings, new infrastructure, but in a way, a new people, new type of human, which now we are seeing everywhere. Just consider the simple fact. 3 months ago, according to sociological research, Ukraine was last country in Europe on the level of trust between people and between institutions. Now, I do believe we're the first one, because this incredible amount of people giving everything and trying to help people, they are relying very often on a trust only. Giving money, buying something to be distributed to other people, having no money, just a word of trust, just this feeling of trust. I do believe this is a promise of a different relationship, of a different structure, if it will be based, if will be used as a basis for a newly constructed world. And it's not about Ukraine only, it's about Europe as well. Let's look on what's going on with Europe, what's going on with NATO, what's going on globally. Yes, we have different manifestations of this newity, of this new life, depending on people, depending on organization and so on, but it's new science. And this helps to accept even the hardest losses, because we do believe that this new, more just, more equal, more beautiful in outcomes society could be constructed. Not on violence, not on desire to earn money, like Taras already told. We have a wonderful journalist, Zelkin, who is interviewing the Russian captives. And the most striking thing is that in vast majority of cases, the answer to the question why you are here is to earn the money. Listen, guys, what's going on with those people, with this country? So we are giving money just to restore signs of beauty, to create some new, where will be a different people, where people will be building this life for their children. So it is not my variant of answer to your very hard question, Ivo.
Thanks. Yeah, we have 7 minutes left, and then it's on the hour. So let's go to our final round of checkout and appeals. Like, we're talking about the future here. So, you know, what are your hopes? What are your, the hopes, basically, possible obstacles? Who knows? So, looking to the future, and a few minutes. Do you want to pick up on that one, Katja?
I want to be very brief now, and I want just to recite another poem from a Belarusian poet, also a friend, whose name is Dmitry Strotsev, and it's translated from Russian by Ian Propstein. It's very short. The future will come out of the Ukrainian basement and will close its eyes from light. Thank you.
Thank you. Taras, do you want to pick it up?
I think it's not the fight of Ukraine against Russia. It's the fight of horizontal structures of bottom-up self-organization that I believe all of us believe here versus vertical structures. The world of vertical structures, the world of authoritarian governing, whether it's military-industrial complex of United States, whether it's warmongering empires colonizing other less lucky countries or nations, should end in order to fight against global change, global climate change, in order to fight against different types of existential threats. We need to be unity. We need to be all together as 8 billion people. There is no other way. So we need to step outside of this. And wars are cancer on our body. We need to heal that cancer. So we need to heal this cancer now with this war. And then globally, as the whole humanity, look into the stars, look into something kind and loving and connective and unifying. So I believe now we need to unite for this cause, and hopefully you can help us. How you can help us now? Help us with your political pressure on your government. Help us with finances, help us to buy more weapons and stop this war. Thank you.
Thank you. Lilia?
Yeah, just a few words. Ukraine is showing unity right now, and all the people are united, helping each other, and the world is facing challenges as well. So Ukraine is at the end showing that only unitedness, only being one, can really solve very difficult, unpleasant, and life questions, because we do have climate change and other challenging problems that we have to solve. And we can see how other countries are united with Ukraine, sending support and everything. I mean, that's the only chance that we as a humankind can survive, I believe. And finishing, I heard my insight from all the situation should be mindfulness have to be engaged, have to act, not only observe, not only stand aside, but to show up and to act with a courage and with a love.
Thank you very much. Okay, yeah, we have a few minutes left. I just really want to thank the whole audience, and me and Jonathan, you have some closing words, I think. We thank the audience for being here, for showing up and taking this to heart. I hope we will continue doing this. I hope if there's ever any doubt about how you can participate or don't know what to do with your energy or emotions, please join us in our weekly calls. We'll also have a fundraiser on the 16th of June, where we dive more deeply into these topics. I feel, it's hard to get the sense of the depth and the realness that we experience in our calls. But this is very much what we're trying to bring forward, and very much. And Jonathan, any final words? You're still muted.
I was saying I don't have a poem, but I did want to end just by asking people who are coming to this maybe relatively new in terms of how much time and they thought about the issue, just to think of Ukraine as a kind of mirror. What do you see there? Because personally, I see a great deal. I mean, Mihail spoke to that about the role of beauty in revitalizing the world. The sort of the courage and endurance, the very strong sense that life is worth living, and that building a home together is of deep primordial importance, and that resisting unjust attack is of deep primordial importance, and that calling for help is a form of wisdom and deeply human thing to do. And that when people call for help, if you're able to, you should respond. And for all the reasons we've mentioned, I think what's happening in Ukraine really matters, not just geopolitically, but for those who are interested in this world of personal growth and development. It's very interesting to look at it, because we want to believe that everyone is equally good and everyone's equally redeemable, that there is no sociopathy or psychopathy out there, that there are no bad guys in the closet, but it's not so clear. You know, there's signs of evil and cruelty and brutality. And how do you deal with that as you're trying to grow and become better and wiser and so forth? How do you speak to peace when the reality of war is so vivid and painful? It's a really big challenge. It's a test for all of us to make sense of what it means to grow as a person in that charged, real, vivid context. And I'm just very grateful to have met all these wonderful people as part of this process, and to play a small part in making sense of it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Jonathan. Yeah, final word. So how can we find you? That's a really good question, obviously. Our Twitter for Emerge, that has a link to our Mighty Network. All the invitations go out. You can also go to Jonathan, can you please write that in the chat? Yeah. Whatisemerging.com.
Sure.
And you can sign up to our newsletter. So the invitation for our weekly calls goes out always through there as well. So thanks everyone for coming, and thank you Thomas and Elizabeth for hosting us here. So thank you very much. Yeah, back to you.
Yeah, thank you so much for all that you're doing and for all that you're leading us in. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.